Welcome, friends. Please silence your cell phones. Today's presentation is on adepts, masters, teachers, and disciples. Next Sunday, there will be a roundtable reading and discussion on studies and the secret doctrine. On Sunday, July 22, there will be a presentation on service through knowledge and works, followed by roundtable readings and discussions every first and third Sunday, currently on the Bhagavad Gita. All work of this lodge is aimed at passing on, in their purity, teachings of the ancient message from the Masters of Wisdom that H.P. Blavatsky named Theosophy. It is left to each of us in our own way to assimilate this powerful and common sense message, thus making it a living power in our every thought and action. Please help with your attendance on Sundays at 11 a.m. or whatever you can do to keep alive and thriving these uplifting teachings that lead to an uplifted future for humanity. We are located in the Washington, D.C. area at 4865A Cordell Avenue, Bethesda, Maryland, 20814. We are guided by the declaration that Robert Crosby used in 1909 to launch the United Lodge of Theosophists and return the teachings to the lines laid down by the great founders through their messenger, H.P. Blavatsky, and her staunch colleague, William Q. Judge. To this end, we work independently and with each other to achieve a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. We hold that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. We have neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers. The sole bond between associates is the furtherance of unity. We regard as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service to humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and we welcome to our association all who are in accord with the purposes of our declaration and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is from the Dhammapada. Oh, 43, the enlightened ones. By what track can you allure one who is enlightened? Trackless indeed is he. His victory naught can undo. None of this world can touch that victory. He is a seer of limitless range. By what track can you allure one who is enlightened? Trackless indeed is he. No net of desire can catch him. No craving can entangle him. He is a seer of limitless range. Even the devas, shining gods, aspire to emulate the enlightened one. Wise who are great contemplators, who are the peaceful ones, who are steadfast and tranquil. Difficult it is to obtain birth as a human being. difficult it is to live the life of a man. Difficult it is to get to hear the true law. Difficult it is to attain enlightenment. Eschew all evil. Cultivate and establish thyself in good. Cleanse thy mind, so teach the Buddhas. Enduring patience is the highest tapas. Nirvana is the supreme state. So teach the Buddhas. He who opposes another is no recluse. He who harms another is no ascetic. Revile not, harm not, discipline thyself according to the law. Be moderate in eating, dwell with solitude, be devoted to higher thought. Such is the teaching of the Buddhas. Lust are never satisfied, not even by a shower of gold. He who knows that enjoyment of passion is short-lived, and also is the womb of pain, is a wise man. Even in celestial pleasures he finds no delight. The disciple of the supremely enlightened delights in the destruction of craving. Man driven by fear seek refuge on mountains and forests, under sacred trees or at shrines. Such refuge is not secure. Such refuge is not the best. Such refuge frees not a man from pain. He takes refuge in the enlightened one, in the law, in the order, perceives clearly before noble truths. Suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the noble eightfold path, treading which all suffering is transcended. That verily is the safe refuge, the best refuge. In that refuge man is free from all pain. An exalted man is rare to find. Not anywhere is he born. Wherever a wise and noble one is born, that household prospers. Blessed is the birth of the Buddha. Blessed is the teaching of the good law. Blessed is the concord and the order. Blessed is the austerity of those who live in concord. He who pays homage to those who are worthy of homage, be they the enlightened ones or their disciples, those who have overcome the host of evil and crossed beyond the stream of sorrow, he who pays homage to the fearless and powerful ones, his merit cannot be measured by any. And now for today's thought.
Good morning and welcome, friends. The Theosophical literature refers to a brotherhood or lodge of perfected beings. And we come across all these terms in the teachings, adepts, masters, mahatmas, teachers, and disciples. And it is important to understand that they all belong to one system, as we can see as we go through the talk today. In the glossary, actually HPB defines some of these terms. For instance, an adept is he who has obtained. In occultism, one who has reached the stage of initiation and become a master in the science of esoteric philosophy. And further on, she tells us what a Mahatma is. Literally, great soul, an adept of the highest order, exalted beings who, having attained to the mastery over their lower principles, are thus living unimpeded by the men of flesh, and are in possession of knowledge and power commensurate with the stage they have reached in their spiritual evolution, called in Pali Rahats and Arhats. So we see that the progression to perfection is not a one-step process, that even after one has mastered certain portals or keys, one has to still evolve to a higher degree of perfection by self-induced, self-devised efforts. So, who are the disciples? Well, in 1888, HPB invited the exoteric body of Theosophists to join her inner section that she was formulating. And if you look at the literature, she said that a lot of her students wanted to try to become disciples. However, she says, the Western world is not really suited to go through that very strict discipline that actually has to be managed by oneself before one is accepted as a disciple. So then, a disciple is simply a student. First, we should talk about the adepts, because as we move along, all the others will come into it as well. So there is one lodge, we should put here, one lodge of great souls. And this is the Lodge of the Masters, or the Lodge of the Brotherhood, or the Lodge of the great beings who help humanity move forward. So, 1888, invitation to become students in her second section that she had formulated. What are the adepts? Adepts are men whose sense of self has transcended the limitations of the body, of the senses, and of the mind. They know that they are life. As the one drop of water is part of that whole body of water, so then they know that their self-consciousness with that self is identification with the all. So then they are those souls who have reached to that degree of perfection, from the definition that we have read, that are ready for initiation. Because what does HPB tell us in all of her writings? That we can go so far but no further on our own. This progression of readiness in ourselves come to a certain point beyond which we cannot go on our own, is what she's telling us. So then the adepts are initiates. What are they initiates of? The mysteries. In the olden days, the mysteries were conducted externally, in using that form to teach humanity in general. So they are initiates of the mysteries. 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 Their every action, therefore, the conscious relation of life to life, with life. The adept is conscious that he is life, that on which he acts is life, and that through which he acts is life. So here we are, life. We all know that our body is made up of component parts. We're made up of principles. But nevertheless, if all those principles and all those organ systems do not work together, we cannot exist in full health and harmony. So, as we know that every member must serve every other, and so serving serve the whole body, in other words, the whole, all suffer. So the adept knows that every being must live a life of service to all the other beings, or all must suffer. So the adept knows the life of the soul is contingent upon the universal brotherhood of all beings. As the strength of the body lies in its unitary coordination of all of the members, so the power of the adeptship lies in the spiritual coordination of all forces of life. Now that statement has a lot of stuff in it. We have gone through many talks about the forces of life, powers of obtained by perfected beings. They're all listed in the secret doctrine. Our bodies are mortal, though the matter it is formed of is immortal. Because what does she tell us? She says that the atoms are never created. They always exist, not created. Are they physical? No, they're psycho-spiritual. So we know that the form is destroyed because it changes, but the matter or substance made up of atoms is always there. It is never created. So then matter is immortal because of the atoms are immortal. Our minds are mortal, though formed of ideas which are immortal. So these truths that this brotherhood brings out intermittently into some part of the world or all of the world, which was the case in 1875 when H.P. came on the scene and brought this philosophy out once more. Our sense of self is mortal, though formed of intelligence, which is immortal. So the adept then is a man who has identified his body with matter, atoms that are immortal. His mind with ideas, his sense of self with intelligence, and thus has become consciously immortal in matter, mind, and knowledge. This is a spiritual existence, and thus the adept wills immortal powers, where other men whose sense of self is separate are mortal in body, mind, in knowledge, and go from waking to sleeping, from sleeping to waking, from birth to death, from death to birth, in ignorance of their own immortality. So the adept then has unified all of his component parts into a whole. He has overcome the lower. He now lives in the Buddhi monastic world, and his aim is to help all. So we need to also understand what the declaration says. That brotherhood that they were trying to initiate during that period is not sectarian. It is universal, because they help each and every soul under karma that has earned that help. HPB has an article where she's talking about masters, and I thought it would be very appropriate to read it. During her time, she was the one that brought out this philosophy, but not only did she bring this philosophy out, but she also brought out that this knowledge that she was imparting to the universe. And please remember that what she brought out was a very small amount of the secret doctrine. Even though it is called secret doctrine, we have to remember that that secret doctrine that she brought out of the this secret doctrine, the totality, is in the keeping of the Master's Lodge, because for millenniums they have been in charge of retaining without changing that philosophy, the truths that will guide humanity for all time. So she told us we are lifting the corner of this secret doctrine, and certain portions of it, a very small amount, will be given to the world. This is her article under the title The Theosophical Mahatmas, and it really is beneficent for everyone to read it, because it has tremendous information in it that is useful. She is informing certain students who were complaining that the masters were not responding to their call. They wanted to join the ranks in service, but HPB always explains that this service has to come in time, because we must not force ourselves into their sphere. We have to wait until they come to us. She says here, our masters are not a jealous God. They are simply holy mortals. Nevertheless, however, higher than any in this world, morally, intellectually, and spiritually, no higher than those are known. However holy and advanced in the science of the mysteries, there are still men, members of a brotherhood, who are the first in it to show themselves subservient to its time-honored laws and rules. And one of the first rules in it demands that those who start on their journey eastward as candidates to the notice and favors of those who are the custodians of those mysteries should proceed by the straight road, without stopping on every side way and path, seeking to join other masters and professors, often of the left-hand science, that they should have confidence and show trust and patience, besides several other conditions to fulfill. So then, here we are told, these are a brotherhood, men who are holy, and their knowledge supersedes all our knowledge on earth. because they have reached that perfection where they become that knowledge themselves. It says here, the language of the soul, and therefore the soul of all languages is symbols. That language is universal. Like the incarnating ego in man, it embodies itself in many forms. Religions, philosophies, sciences, all branches of knowledge spring from the wisdom religion, which has for its vehicle this ancient universal language. The wisdom religion, or Theosophy, is the drama of the unfoldment of the one life, the springing forth of the many lives from the one life, and the orderly procession of the many as the kingdoms of nature till they re-become the one, from the contents of the record of the masters, and that is Theosophy. So then this portion of this secret doctrine that was brought out, is, even though a very small portion, nevertheless is that philosophy which is the root of all sciences, all religions, all philosophies. There is that root that everything comes from, and this is the secret doctrine. So then, when we go to the secret doctrine, we find out that there are 7 classes of Dayan Chohans. 7. Seven classes of Dayan Chohans. And this 7 is the number for this age, and it occurs many, many times in the literature. And we are told that the theosophical expression of this great lodge is Mahashala. So the lodge is referred to as Mahashala, a Sanskrit term, Mahashala. It is not a place, but the collectivity of beings whose self-conscious intelligence transcends human comprehension. And it is stated that in this house are lodged 7 types of men, pure rays of light, each but an issue of the 7 sacred planets called the 7 lords, rishis by the Brahmanas, Ameshashpentas by the Zoroastrians, archangels by the Christians. Of these translucent men, it is said that they can no longer err. They appear on earth, but at the origin of every new human race, and at the junction or close of the 2 ends of the small and great cycle, and are known as avatars or incarnations. Their stay among mortals is exactly the time required and no more to impress upon the plastic minds of child humanity the eternal verities which they embody in their own innate ideas. Here is the true source of the very common belief in revelation, which is not of books read or hymns heard, but of truths impressed in the heart of men. This is done so as to ensure the eternal truths from being utterly lost or forgotten by the forthcoming generations. So as a result of this spiritual mission, some souls, however few in number, make the supreme effort to follow the noble example set by this great sacrifice, this Mahatmic sacrifice. by this lodge. We'll talk a little bit about the disciples or chelas. I'll put here this word. It's the same thing as a disciple, and you'll come across both of those terms in the literature. So, Mr. Judge, in his explanation of this term, says that a lot of error had crept into understanding exactly what that word meant. He says a chela simply means a disciple, but it has been crystallized in the literature of Theosophy, and for different minds means different things, just like God does. However, he says a chela who is simply a student, a disciple, is accepted into the care of an adept. So, how then do we get the real meaning of it? Now, there are chelas and chelas, just like there are masters and masters. So, as someone who is just initiating this process and is newly accepted into this position, obviously is not the same as one who has held that position for a long time and is progressing on the road according to their own effort. So HPB in her article tells us that this cycle of trial equals 7 years. Now, of course, it's not just 7 years, it can be multiples of 7 years. Cycle of trial. So then, she also tells us that Tibetan monks have been at it for a very long time, and they have purified themselves to such a degree that they really fulfill all of the requirements to become chelas to the masters. So the West then has a lot of work to do. But even among the Westerners, there are some who want to try it, and then they have to make themselves fit for this trial of 7 years. A chela is an unfortunate man, it says, who has entered upon a path not manifest. This is from the Gita. And Krishna says that that is the most difficult path. Because we have heard about the path, the voice mentions it, the paramitas are there, that opens the gates of the 7 devotional stages that we have to go through. But this is not a manifest path, it is unmanifest, so one of the most difficult to follow. So then the chela is not the constant mouthpiece of his guru. More than other people who are not chelas, he is left alone in the world. And his path is surrounded by dangers which will appall many an aspirant, were they depicted in natural colors. So that instead of accepting his guru and passing an entrance examination with a view to becoming Bachelor of Art of Occultism under his master's constant and friendly guidance, he really forces his way into a guarded enclosure and has from that moment to fight and conquer or die. So this is a very difficult path to follow, very difficult. And we just heard he's left on his own to swim or sink, in other words. He has to either conquer all of his shortcomings and move on or die. So instead of accepting, he has to be worthy of acceptance. Worthy of acceptance, even as a chelah into that great brotherhood or that lodge. So they choose their candidates very carefully. One of the Mahatmas has within the year written, "Never thrust yourselves upon us for Chelaship. Wait until it descends upon you." So, a Chela then is simply an ordinary human being who has been accepted on this cycle of trial by one of the adepts, and he has to then make his own way. The power of Chelas vary with their progress, and everyone should know that if a Chela has any powers, he is not permitted to use them, except in rare and exceptional cases. So then, beginners have no more or greater power than an ordinary man, because even if something develops, they're not allowed to use it. So his chief task is to divest himself or that overmastering sense of personality, which is the thick veil that hides from sight our immortal part, the real man. So long as he allows this feeling to remain, just so long will he be fixed at the very door of occultism, unable to proceed any further. So sentimentality then is not part of this process. Sentimentality is not part of this process. His road is very harsh. His work is hard, the road is stony, and the end is far, far away. So, when we then discuss a Chela, we also must not get involved in sentimentality. We must use discrimination in identifying those whom we call disciples or Chelas of this secret, mysterious path. Who are the teachers? Who are the teachers? Well, we just said there's this great great path to follow, and the teachers come amongst these perfected souls to give a certain part of that teaching to the world. But when we look at the history of these teachers that come on the scene, in the past we notice that nothing was written down. The Buddha did not write anything down, Jesus did not write anything down, Apollonius did not write anything down, but Damis, who was his disciple, did. He kept a record every day of what happened, and eventually it was put in a book form, and that book, a single copy, is still in the Library of Congress. It is written in Greek. So then, when Buddha was asked, is there the ego, by a wandering monk, he did not reply with an answer. Plato, withdrawing behind the veils of allegory and myth, normally confuses the unwary minds with these fantastic physics and geography. And it's the same mystery he's talking about. Why? Have we heard of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who is alone our Savior, who died in agony on the cross that our sins might be washed away? what truer than this statement? If the Christ be within each one, each man, and what more false is he be, another and without? The difference is only a word, within or without, but look at the difference it makes. HPV wrote, if we at times speak bitterly of popular modern Christianity, it is because we know that with all its other ennobling and saving tendencies, on this all-important point, it leads to the destruction of myriads of souls. For it leads to the belief that it signifies little what a man does if he only believes that his sins are forgiven him, and that by relying on the merits of Jesus Christ, he may escape the vengeance of the Lord. But there is no anthropomorphic Lord, no vengeance, no forgiveness. There is simply the action of a natural law, impressed on the universe by the absolute, simply a question of balance of affinities, and they whose deeds and general tendencies are earthly go down in the scale, rarely, very rarely, to rise again in their own identities, while those in whom these tendencies are spiritual pass upwards. So then, the bond of compassion is also the bond of mental woe unspeakable, because those who love humanity and come on the scene to deliver the message are working at a great sacrifice. And we know why their resistance is there. To teach the laws of the path is within the power of every adept, but every disclosure gives power. It is one thing to transmit doctrines orally to the disciple at low breath, in other words, from mouth to ear and within the sanctuary, while the burden of responsibility borne by the Hierophant is great. How much more hazardous an undertaking it is to place in writing within the reach of all secret doctrines lost to the world for many centuries. Who can measure the knowledge that belonged to H.P. Blavatsky and to her hidden colleagues under whose guidance she worked? When we look at the Theosophical movement, even within her lifetime, the occult pretenders made capital of the most sacred of her teachings. And as the sevens multiplied, in other words, every 7 years that passed, the corruption multiplied beyond calculation. So then we have to ask ourselves why this philosophy was written down in book form, especially for these beings who can look and see into the future. So the founders of the Theosophical movement must long before have known these things would come. HPV herself said she did not take up her mission blindly. The fact that they and she saw it all nevertheless caused the wisdom religion to be recorded in its present form for the first time. So that shows that the public teaching was a necessity of our cycle. That HPB was chosen to be the messenger hints of her greatness as a being who could serve such a service at that time. So then the havoc wrought, not by her coming, but by a world little able to bear her presence, suggests in some measure the sacrifice of one who would serve at such a high cost. We'll finish with a quotation from HPB. She said, "I can only show the way to those whose eyes are open to the truth, whose souls are full of altruism, charity, and love for the whole creation, and who think of themselves less. I am ready to answer the call of any good theosophist who works for Theosophy on the lines traced by the masters, and as ready as the Rosicrucian pelican to feed with my heart's blood the chosen seven. So she tells us, with each morning's awakening, try to live through the day in harmony with the higher self. Try is the battle cry taught by the teacher to each pupil. Naught else is expected of you. One who does his best does all that can be asked. HPP. And now we will answer questions. Or listen to some comments. Yes.
It seems like we just undergo cycles of these great ones coming, ensuing confusion, and then it gets all mixed up, and they have to come in and redo it, so to speak. She says, do not let my incarnation be in vain. And we're finding within the Theosophical movement just exactly what's going on in the other movements of the centuries, which is things getting entered in for reasons other than trying to maintain the truth, for personal reasons hidden in in the idea of Theosophy.
So you're saying that corruption sets in?
Yes.
Oh.
That's why ULT came in existence.
Yes. Corruption always sets in. There was one quotation here. And here's what it is said. We sometimes suppose the sufferings of life are more than we can bear, that our privations, our losses and miseries have never been equaled. And she's asking this question, but think of one who had come as a teacher among mankind, who taught a little of the mystery of the divine incarnation, and then having passed from the scene, what men made of the doctrine he had brought. One who has heard for nearly 2,000 years men of God in houses of God thunder the text, he that believeth on him is not condemned, but that he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. What could ameliorate this tragedy of such a spectacle, she's asking. So, as Jesus's message got corrupted, and who was doing the corruption? These are the men of God in houses of God, promulgating whatever they made of this teachings that he had brought out. So HPB, when she came at the 19th century, her statements also have been changed and corrupted, because people do not study the philosophy. They do not enlarge their consciousness to understand the underlying causes to the statements made. The teacher goes wide in the field. In the Sikh doctrine alone, 6 great religions are compared. She shows what is true in each one and throws out what is not true. Now, we can go and do the same research for ourselves, because everything that she has quoted in those books, except Zan, is available for us to go to this research. But the advantage of her doing it was that she could sift it, because she's a perfected being, because she's an initiate. Obviously, she's perfected in that hierarchy. Plus, the masters, the ones that are sifting this information down to humanity through her, are great souls, and they are the knowers. So she's giving it in its true form, so that if we can do the work and understand it, we would also come to the true understanding of the book. The book in itself is a secret doctrine, even though she says once you open the cover, it no longer is secret, because it is given to the whole world to read. But what is in it does not divulge the underlying meaning to us very easily. And that requires study and understanding, the study and making it a living power in your own life. Only then would you know what it really means. And also, as you go along on this path, being able to share it with others. So what is she telling us? She's giving us, in the Key to Theosophy, a practical way of living the life. She's assisting us as to how we should go about doing it. So service to humanity comes first. Service. Service to humanity. At the same time, the 6 paramitas in the voice of the silence is given for all of us. What's the first one? Dana or Dana, which is love and charity. And Mr. Judge tells us we're not going anywhere without this being a composite part of your nature, that when someone asks you for help, your natural tendency is to say yes. Don't find an excuse not to say yes, but to actually say yes and see what you can do. There's always something, even if it is as little as a smile, he says, it's something you can do. So without that, we're not going anywhere. So then she's telling us how to follow this path. She talks about the path, but she's also excuse me, showing us how to follow it. So, living the life. Making the philosophy your own is essential in this philosophy. It cannot be put in from the outside by force, because it's self-induced, self-devised effort that is necessary. In other words, the soul has awakened to its inner life, that it perceives that inner life. And there is one sentence that needs to be read. Which one was it? So it's right here. Unless radical reforms in our American and European societies are speedily resorted to, I fear that before long there will remain but one center of theosophical societies and real theosophy in the whole world, namely in India. On that country I call all the blessings on my heart. All my love and aspirations belong to my beloved brothers, the sons of old Aryavarta, the motherland of my master. She wrote that in 1886 they had already started corrupting her philosophy at that time because of this narrowness, people not doing the work themselves. You cannot accept what someone else tells you. You have to do that work yourself. And that is why it was written, so that even if people tried to change it, they would not be very successful in doing it, because the original, as you said, through RC, is still around. We have the facsimile photocopies of the original, so we have the originals with us. Even though it has been corrupted and changed by many, still the real is with us, and so we can find it. We can study it for ourselves. Yes?
It says here in the Dhammapada that those who seek refuge out of fear basically is not the thing to do. Even seeking refuge in the secret doctrine is not possible, right?
No. The secret doctrine does not divulge its underlying knowledge to you until you have become service oriented, that your life to some degree is donated to the welfare of the others. Even if that welfare is just one other, you're still trying. And she says, all is expected of you is all that you can do to the best of your ability. No more is ever demanded by anyone from anybody else, but their very best that they can do, not what they cannot do, what they can do. So until until we learn to study the secret doctrine, and remember, secret doctrine comes from Isis, and Isis has a lot of information in it that prepares us to understand secret doctrine. A lot of people don't even read Isis Unveiled, but this student has read it and reread it and rereads it all the time, because a lot of information that's in Isis is not in the secret doctrine. If you want to learn about magnetism and electricity, all that stuff is in the in Isis Unveiled. So she wrote it in a particular way because she was preparing the human mind to open it outward to a greater consciousness. As our consciousness enlarges and we include others in it, so our capacity to serve also enlarges, because you understand that you're part of the other, and that love and care is a natural instinct in the human heart. It isn't something we're going to put in, because the impress is there. All we have to do is just let it open outward to express itself, in other words, because there is no greater teacher than that center of silence in each human heart. And that is what true meditation really is reaching this center of silence. And you have to hear the voice of the silence that she lists on, is it page 7 or 11 of the voice of the silence, where all of the stages that you go through in hearing the master within your own heart has its 7 stages. Last one, she says, absorbs all the others, they go quiet and are heard no more. So then you hear the voice of the silence, which is the inner master, that Christ principle we talked about. That inner versus outer makes all the difference in the universe, whether you're going to go towards this philosophy, service to humanity, knowing that you're part of the whole, that all of humanity is linked not only to one another, but to all of nature. All of the kingdoms of nature look up to humanity, because we have reached self-consciousness and they have not yet. So this is a progressive science, progressive path, progressive learning, and she tells us, have courage, have humility, have confidence, have conviction, have patience, because we just heard the masters that gave it out are all in a fraternity of a lodge, there they assist each and every human soul that has reached to that degree, that has earned that right from them for that help.
So you have to approach it through love and motive. Motive has to be correct. Love has to be there. All the things you listed have to be there.
Our aim is not to reach them. When you're ready, the teacher appears, and that's what we have to remember. Thank you, everyone.